So welcome back to the Friday 5 for November 18th, 2022. My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm a business law and estate planning attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. And today we're going to look at 5 questions that came up across the week in some consultations and meetings with clients that may be of interest to you, maybe give you a quick answer or some other things you want to research. So question number 1 we ran into: are there different rules for my estate plan if my spouse is not a U.S. citizen? You can probably guess by the framing of the question that the answer is yes. There's very different rules if your spouse is not actually a U.S. citizen. What you want to do is make sure you understand those rules as you're putting together your estate plan. So for example, there's different taxation rules for how they can inherit your assets, and it can actually be a much higher estate tax where you may not even have to incur an estate tax on your own personal estate if you are a U.S. citizen. So when clients come to me and say my spouse is not a U.S. citizen, and especially when they own property overseas, we want to make sure that we've got a proper plan in place so that we don't leave a big tax debt for somebody after you're gone. Number 2, should I do a standalone trust or a trust in my will, what's called a testamentary trust? Now, just like question number 1 this week, question number 2 is really depending upon your current situation and what's going to make the most sense for you. The main difference you should know about is that standalone trust will be set up now, and you have the ability to contribute to it at this time. So if you have assets you want to place into the trust while you're still living, especially if you can do something like a special needs or supplemental needs trust, you may need to do a standalone trust. However, many of my clients who have small children who are under the age of 18 want to set up what's called a testamentary trust, which is a trust that's set up in your will after you die. So if you and your spouse both die, then the trust gets set up to manage money for your children and appoint a guardian to make sure there's somebody there to take care of them. So you really need to look at the pros and cons of a standalone versus a trust in your will, the testamentary trust, so you can decide which is best for your situation. Number 3, which seems pretty basic but it's pretty important, is can I update my trust? So this came up in the context of we had a husband and wife who created a trust together. The husband has died, and now the wife is left with the trust and her estate plan documents, but she wants to make some changes to the trust. And the question is, can she make those changes? Everyone just assumes, sure, we can make changes to our trust, so we go to see the lawyer and we're all set to go. There's a couple things you have to look for, though. The first is, what kind of trust is it? If it's what we call an irrevocable trust, meaning one that cannot be changed, well, then you probably can't make that change to the trust easily. You may actually have to break the trust apart, which is not something that you're just going to want to try to do on your own. Second thing you have to look for is make sure the trust allows for the trust to be changed after one of the parties dies. So I've seen many trusts over the years where the grantors, the people who make the trust, have a provision that says when the first of them to die dies, there can be no more changes to the trust. So just because you have that trust and your spouse died doesn't mean you automatically can make an easy change. You may have to go through some legal steps before you're able to make that change to your trust. Number 4, how hard is it to file a breach of contract lawsuit? So on the business side of things, I had a discussion with a client who's owed some money under a contract, and of course the other party hasn't paid for a few months now. The services have been ended, and they need to get paid. They've tried to collect. They've written to their client. Their client's just not responding and not paying their bills. So my client comes to me and says, "How hard is it to file the breach of contract lawsuit?" Well, it's going to be hard for my client because the breach of contract lawsuit is in the name of the business. So my client can't just file it on their own because companies need to be represented by an attorney. So then that means that my client has to come to me so we can prepare the breach of contract lawsuit, which is actually why it's easy to file a breach of contract lawsuit. It shouldn't be hard for a client at all because there's not much for them to do. They have to give a copy of the contract to their attorney, give them some facts so that a proper breach of contract lawsuit can be filed with the court. And number 5 for this week, can I serve a subpoena if I'm representing my company? And this goes back to our answer in number 4, is a lawyer has to represent a company. And part of the lawyer's job in representing the company that's in a lawsuit is they're able to serve subpoenas and other document demands as part of the lawsuit. However, if you're trying to do this yourself and you're not a lawyer, you're probably not entitled to serve a subpoena on behalf of your company. Now, this changes if you're representing yourself. So if you're in a lawsuit personally and you're named in the lawsuit and you're representing yourself, you can serve subpoenas, but the process is usually a little different. Commonly, you're going to have to go to the court and have either a clerk or the judge in your case sign the subpoena if you want it to be served on somebody. There may not be the same automatic right to serve a subpoena that you would have when you have an attorney representing you. So those are our 5 questions for this week on November 18th. Are there different rules if my spouse is not from the United States? Should I do a standalone trust or a testamentary trust? Can I update my trust? How hard is it to file a breach of contract lawsuit? And can you serve a subpoena on behalf of your company if you're trying to represent that company? Now, it's a cold day in Minnesota. We've been having snow all week. The temperatures have been low, but I hope wherever you are, you have a great weekend. If you'd like to ask questions for a future Friday 5 episode, you'll see a link in the description you can go to. You can see past episodes of the Friday 5 and send in some questions for future episodes. And if I don't hear from you, have a great weekend. And if I don't talk to you before then, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday next week.